There is a new slogan in today's China: to get rich is glorious. An astonishing turn for a Marxist country. The symbols of this quiet revolution are people with money in their pockets, a man taking home his first washing machine, a young woman paying a month's salary for makeup, mobs of people trying to buy wedding rings. Is China moving from Marx to Mastercard? Join us next on an Adam Smith Money World special, Adam Smith in the New China.
Adam Smith's Money World is made possible by Metropolitan Life and affiliated companies, one of America's leading pension fund managers with over $40 billion in pension assets.
Additional funding for Adam Smith in the New China has been provided by public television stations.
This billboard says, "Long live the great thoughts of Marx, Lenin, and Mao." 9 years ago, when I was last in China, this is about the only message you saw anywhere. You got up in the morning and the loudspeakers blared a stirring march called "The East is Red." But now things have changed in China, and many of the messages are different. I'm Adam Smith, and this is the portrait of Mao Zedong overlooking Tiananmen Square in Beijing, China. Mao's portrait is disappearing from much of China, though he is still officially venerated. But Mao's China is changing rapidly. China is beginning to try some aspects of a market economy, what looks to some observers like the first steps of capitalism. This is the China we found just a few weeks ago. What you are seeing is a revolution in progress. Now, there are none of the familiar signs of revolution, no blown-up buildings, no AK-47s being fired, but it is a revolution nonetheless. The symbols of this revolution are a young couple carrying a fan they've just bought, or a young man carting home a new refrigerator. The most populous country on earth, a centrally controlled Marxist state, is trying economic reform, a market economy opening to the world outside, and this is a radical change. Just 10 years ago, the word capitalism in China stood for evil, exploitation, corruption, greed, colonialism. Mao Zedong believed in keeping the revolution boiling. Red Guards came into people's homes looking for signs of capitalism. A necktie, a piece of jewelry, books, all that would get you labeled a capitalist roader and sent to exile or jail. Children were told in school to denounce wayward parents. China was xenophobic, closed to outsiders, its economy run along Soviet lines by the party elite in Beijing. Now, the intense energy that fueled those rallies is found in consumer enthusiasm, like these people shopping for wedding rings. Students who once learned Marxism are taking business courses in how to negotiate with Americans and other foreigners. And selling the ideas from Mao's Little Red Book has changed to something much more familiar, the selling of products in commercials, like this one for Sichuan Cola. What happened? Where did this astonishing revolution begin? Here you had a Marxist country with no inflation, no unemployment, no television commercials, and they had to change it. Living standards were low. 30 years after the revolution, there was still rationing. And meanwhile, around them in the Pacific Basin, the free market economies of Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore were taking off. Now, the Chinese are pragmatic people. They said Karl Marx was all very well in the 19th century, and Chairman Mao was brilliant, led the revolution, but this is now, and we have to adapt. There are some risks: greed, corruption, inflation. That's what you might get with a market economy, but we're prepared to take some risks. Much of the change is due to the leadership of one pragmatic man, the current Chinese leader, Deng Xiaoping. The story of the reforms is really the story of Deng Xiaoping, a Chinese pragmatist who lived to tell the tale. Deng joined the Communist Party in the early 1920s while he was studying in France. A few years later, he returned to China, met Mao Zedong, and signed on for the revolution. The Communists seized power in 1949, and Deng's friendship with Mao was rewarded. By the early 1960s, he was the party general secretary, one of the top 4 men in China. But there was a problem. Deng was a pragmatist. Under the Communists, the Chinese were still poor, and he felt something had to be done. While Mao was preaching constant revolution, Deng was trying to increase farm production. He even pushed through some moderate economic reforms in the early 1960s. They would come to haunt him. In 1966, when Mao fired up his Cultural Revolution, Deng was denounced as a capitalist roader. He was paraded around in a dunce cap by the Red Guards, stripped of his title, and sent to work as a waiter. 7 years later, in 1973, he made a surprise reappearance as vice premier. With the help of other pragmatists in the party, he had engineered a comeback. It was a political triumph, but it did not last. Deng once again pushed too hard for the pragmatic. He mapped out reforms for the Chinese economy and was immediately labeled a heretic. In 1976, he was thrown out of office for the second time. But Mao Zedong, who had been ill, died in September 1976. A scramble for power began. The pragmatists denounced Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, and her cohorts as the Gang of Four, and a public trial began for the notorious radicals. It was a way of denouncing Mao's extremism, and it signaled the triumph of the pragmatists. In 1977, Deng returned for the second time. He was appointed vice premier, vice chairman of the party, and army chief of staff. By 1978, Deng was firmly in place, strong enough to put his reforms in motion. He started in the country with the peasants. This is Sichuan province, about 1,100 miles southwest of Beijing. It is Deng Xiaoping's home province. It was here in the rice fields and the cabbage patches that the economic reforms were first begun 6 years ago. And when they succeeded, they were allowed to spread across the rest of China. There are 800 million peasant farmers in this country, 3/4 of the population. So support for the reforms is widespread. And nowhere can the reasons for that support be seen more clearly than in the crowded free markets of Chongqing, Sichuan's largest city. Before the reforms, there were markets like this in Chongqing, but the profits went to the commune or to the state. Now the farmers and vendors get to keep what they make, and the incomes have doubled in the last few years. Each morning, shortly before dawn, farmers from the surrounding countryside come to sell their harvest in the free market. It's set up like a giant outdoor supermarket with a different aisle or corner for each kind of produce. You can buy almost anything here. Leafy vegetables just hours out of the ground, fiery red chili peppers and cloves of garlic that put the heat in Sichuan cooking, and every kind of animal, whether it flies, walks, or swims. But the one thing you see in every corner of the market is the money changing hands, money that will stay in the farmer's pockets. Su Shin Guo raises vegetables and a few pigs and dairy cows on this small plot of land in the Sichuan Hills. Under the reforms, he is part of the responsibility system, taking responsibility for growing his own crops, keeping his profits. In 3 years, his income has gone up 500%.
Originally, my income was $1,000 a year. Last year, I added an acre of land and a milk cow, and my gross income reached $5,000. Out of that, I spent $1,500 on business, $1,400 on a new house, and some on living. I bought a tape recorder, a Sanyo, for $120, and a television, which cost $160. I didn't buy a washing machine.
Su's dwellings are modest, and his television and motorbike hardly seem like the trappings of great wealth. But in today's China, Su Shin Guo is prosperous. He's what's known as a 10,000 yuan farmer. The 10,000 yuan farmer is the state's way of describing its new ideal, the prosperous farmer. The yuan is the Chinese currency, and any farm household making over 10,000 yuan a year, about $3,600, is rich by Chinese standards. Under Mao, farmers were among the poorest people in China. They worked on what were called the people's communes, farms that were state-owned and state-run. Under this collective system, growing something on your own for profit was strictly forbidden. The state told the peasants what crops to grow and set production targets for them that had to be met. The money from the harvest went to the collective, so there was little incentive to grow anything outside the basic quota. The result was food shortages and in some years even famine. In 1979, Deng Xiaoping announced that the collectives were a leftist error. The collectives were broken up and responsibility was returned to individual farm families. The state still owns the land, but the peasants make their own decisions about what and how much to grow. On some basic crops like wheat and rice, there's still a fixed quota, or a tax, or both, but once the conditions are met, all the profits go to the farmer. With the money they've made on the farms, the peasants are branching out into other businesses. Many farmers across China have pooled their resources to set up rural enterprises, a cement factory, a knitting mill, even a high-rise hotel. The state hopes all this activity will charge up the Chinese economy. New money and new jobs created by the 10,000 yuan farmer. This year, Su Shin Guo should make considerably more than 10,000 yuan. For the first time, his new orange grove will be ready for harvest. 5,000 pounds of oranges that he can sell. Su also makes money on his tractor by renting it out to other farmers. And he's got even bigger plans for the future. When we visited him, his son was off in Canton buying a truck, which Su will rent to a new cement factory that he and some of the other villagers have started. And as one of the investors in that factory, he'll receive a share of the profits. Su Shin Guo's family has been farming this fertile land since the turn of the century. Under Mao, they gave everything to the state. Now Su is profiting from his labor, and he is confident that his sons will have the same chance.
I think the reforms will continue. As long as a policy is in the interest of the peasants and the workers, it will be carried on.
the reforms have been carried on. After their success on the farms, they were brought to the cities. In the early 80s, the state decided it would try out economic reform in the cities. But urban economies are more complex than the farm economy. For example, prices and wages affect each other. And the Chinese are a cautious people, so they started slowly and on a small scale. This is a street market in Beijing. It is set up like the farmer's market we saw in Chongqing, but here the harvest is tight new blue jeans, trendy sweatshirts, and the latest in stylish sunglasses. All of this fashion is a sign of the first urban reforms in action, small-time private enterprise. These are private vendors who hustle around, buy things from factories or from stores in the South, and bring them here and sell them on the streets and keep the profits. Now, blue jeans and sunglasses are not exactly the items crucial to the Chinese economy. The steel mills and coal mines are still state-owned. The free markets in the city are a way for the state to experiment with private enterprise. It hopes to stimulate the economy and provide jobs for students just out of school, retired people, and city dwellers returning from the country after years of forced labor under Mao. In other words, for the people who are temporarily unemployed.
To answer Chairman Mao's call, I went to Inner Mongolia in 1968. When I came back in 1981, for health reasons, I didn't have a job. The party encouraged unemployed youths and older people without jobs to start private businesses on our own. So we responded, and we started our own store. This is what is now referred to as to seek your own proper way to make a living.
I used to be a factory worker. After my retirement, I stayed at home. Then I thought, why not do something for the people and make some money at the same time? It's also good for the state because there aren't enough vendors. I'm going to work as long as I'm fit. When I become really old, I will quit the work and rest at home.
The state still owns most of the big industries, so you find private enterprise largely in the service trades, street vendors, taxi drivers, tailors, and restaurant owners. Meet Chen Yin Fun. She and her husband own the Jia Le restaurant in downtown Beijing. It's a private business. They started it up with their own money, plus some they borrowed from friends. Now they run it, pay taxes on their income, and get to keep the profit. The official idea here is a kind of Chinese trickle-down policy, that what's good for Chen is good for China.
Comrade Deng Xiaoping once said, "Let part of the people get rich first." Some people are getting rich now. It isn't possible for all to get rich at the same time. There must be some to take the lead.
Mrs. Chen is taking the lead with enthusiasm. The Chens make a profit on this place of over $1,000 a month, about 15 times more than the local working couples who patronize their restaurant. But the customers are satisfied, business is a success, and the passing of cigarettes is just a way to say thanks. And the state is as happy as the customers. In fact, we did not discover Mrs. Chen. She was featured on CCTV, the state-run Chinese television network. This is a documentary it produced which holds her up as a model worker, an example to the Chinese people. Quite a change from the days when the model worker in China was one toiling on the land for the good of the commune. One of the reasons the state is happy about this year's model is that she's creating jobs. The Jala started with 8 employees, now it's up to 25, And the workers like it because they get paid more than they would in a state-run business. But Mrs. Chen, her husband, and their employees work harder, too, and face much greater pressure to succeed.
We must keep up with the pace of the time and provide the customers with better service. Efficiency is life, and time is money.
Time is money was not one of the phrases in Chairman Mao's Little Red Book, but it has become a popular expression in the new China. It is an attitude the government is actively promoting, even within its own state-run industries. This is the Great China Shirt Factory, a state-run enterprise in Beijing. The workers here turn out over 5 million shirts a year. About 3/4 of those are sold overseas. The rest are sold in China under the famous Temple of Heaven label. The manager of this operation is Guan Shan. Last year, after 30 years in the factory, Manager Guan was given a totally new task, presiding over China's latest reform, the bonus system.
In my factory, before the reforms, it made no difference if you did good work or bad. Workers got the same pay no matter what. Now we take everyone's contribution into account. Workers get more pay for good work, less pay for bad work. The reform has broken the iron rice bowl.
The iron rice bowl is the Chinese phrase for lifetime employment. Under Mao, once you had a job, you had it for life, or even longer, because it was the right of every worker to bequeath his job to one of his children. The security may have been reassuring, but that total state control could also be numbing. The state picked your job for you when you left school, and because no one ever left or got fired, it was almost impossible to get promoted. And no one ever got a raise. From the end of the 1950s until the late 1970s, wages were frozen. Of course, prices were frozen too, and many essentials were very cheap. In the cities, the state owns all the housing, and rent is less than 5% of people's income. Healthcare and education are free, and until recently, all food prices were stabilized. What was missing was incentive. The best a manager could do with an outstanding worker was to give him a crimson armband as a hero of labor. And unfortunately, that didn't buy much more than civic pride. So last year, the bonus system was introduced, and hard workers were given extra pay. At first, everyone was given bonuses, which made the system meaningless. But now that is changing, and there is a crack in the iron rice bowl. Now, if you are not doing a good job, you can, at least in theory, be fired. The workers at the Great China Shirt Factory may have given up the iron rice bowl, but with the chance to make up to 50% more in bonuses, they're working a lot harder.
Generally speaking, things are much easier for me since the reforms. The workers' indifference to their work used to give me headaches. Now they're all enthusiastic and full of drive.
Manager Guan is also working harder. He has had to take on more responsibility. Before, the state told him what to do, and they bought everything he produced. Now he makes most decisions on his own. What materials to buy, how many shirts to make, even where to sell them. The woman walking with Manager Guan is the marketing director for the factory, a job that did not even exist a few years ago.
It used to be that buying and selling could be conducted without stepping out of the office, but that won't do today. I have to select the smartest, most capable people in my factory to do selling and marketing. The new problem is we have to face competition. Because everyone wants to invigorate his enterprise, competition becomes inevitable. This competition is a challenge to us managers. Every day we must keep an eye on the market and be sensitive to its changes. We never had to do that before.
This slogan says, "To get rich is glorious." It has been like a rocket fuel to the Chinese economy, Between 1978 and 1983, total output jumped 61%, and industrial production rose 50%. Farmers doubled their harvests, and this year, China is expecting to produce the largest wheat crop in the world. Peasants now earn more than twice what they earned in the days before reform, and once scarce items like TVs, cassette players, and watches are now common. Those are the numbers. Here is what they look like in action. This is not a riot. These people are waiting to buy gold jewelry in Shanghai, something they never could have done just a few years ago. They start lining up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and despite the mobs, almost everyone seems to think it's worth the wait.
My wife wants me to buy her a necklace.
I'm making more money now, so I can afford to buy jewelry.
I'd like to see if I could pick up a necklace. Maybe I'll buy a ring, too.
I want to buy a chain for my daughter's wedding, but I don't think I can buy it. It's too crowded, yes.
By the time the doors open at 9, the crowd is in a frenzy. This is what it looks like when you release 35 years of consumer demand. One of the reasons people get this worked up is that the store sometimes sells out of its daily quota by 11 o'clock in the morning. If you had a scene like this in the States, with the customers practically battering down the doors to get at the product, you'd have 4 more stores like it on the block by morning. But this is a state-controlled society. This is a state-owned jewelry store. The price and the supply are set by the state, and the state also sets the level of competition.
The state opened jewelry stores like ours to beautify people's lives and satisfy the demand for jewelry. There's another reason, too. Since jewelry is made of precious metal, its price is very high. So the jewelry business is also an important way for the state to withdraw currency from circulation.
So it isn't just necklaces and bracelets the state is pushing. Because the Treasury gets the proceeds, they say it's a way to control inflation. China is finding out that the new reforms don't come without a price tag. Inflation, that money in millions of pockets, could overheat the economy. Another challenge is temporary unemployment. If factories get more efficient, where do the excess workers go? And then there is simple envy. This was supposed to be a classless society. What happens if your neighbor gets rich and you don't? Could there not be a political backlash? And finally, corruption is heating up. As one example, an official collected $5 million for Japanese TVs and skipped with the proceeds.
We're not afraid of problems. The reform is something unprecedented to us. At this point, we're experimenting and we're groping our way forward step by step.
That is the state's position. We spoke with Xia Ye, Secretary General of the State Economic Commission, about the reforms.
There are problems like the ones you just mentioned. We're now giving our attention to them, making an effort to solve them and correct them. And that's why I say our reform is on the whole sound.
To those of us from the West, Mr. Secretary, some of these reforms look right out of the pages of a textbook of capitalism. Do you think these reforms are moving you away from socialism and toward free enterprise?
This is not the case. China will remain a socialist country. We still maintain that the socialist system is superior, without a doubt. Our means of production and land still belong to the state, and we will never turn the means of production from state to private ownership. We exercised a rigidly planned economy which enervated our production. That was our weakness. Now that we're aware of it, we're trying to overcome it. We are making our socialism more vigorous and energetic, but it is not capitalism.
The Chinese leaders want to quadruple the output of the country by the end of the century. And in the name of socialism, they are trying an experiment that has moved beyond any guiding ideology. In economic terms, they are winging it. And they have reversed the direction of Mao Zedong and have taken an even bolder step. They are turning to the outside. This is the harbor of Shanghai, China's largest city. The cannons of British warships opened it to the outside world in 1842. And in the century that followed, many foreigners poured in to trade with what seemed like an enormous market. But Chinese have not always welcomed foreigners, often with good reason. In the old days, the Chinese had a word to describe foreigners, barbarians, and kept them out for centuries. But West was determined to meet East. Marco Polo's journals from the early 1300s sparked the European imagination. By the 17th century, the Portuguese, the British, the Dutch, and the Spanish were there, all insisting on trade with China. To keep the foreigners under control, the emperor confined them to one port, Canton, in 1757. But the Europeans wanted more, especially the British. To stimulate trade, they introduced the Chinese to a product that sometimes creates its own demand, opium. China tried to ban it, but the trade flourished. In 1839, the emperor had 20,000 chests of British opium destroyed. The English struck back. 16 warships bombarded Canton, and the Chinese military was crushed. That inspired other foreigners. By the end of the 19th century, the major powers had virtually carved up China among themselves. Not to be left out, the Americans came in with the open door policy, a plan that ensured everyone, except China, got a fair share. In World War II, the Japanese conquered China. And even after 1945, civil war followed. So it was not until the communists came to power in 1949 that China was both unified and free of foreign domination. And Chairman Mao was determined to keep it that way. But now, under Deng Xiaoping's reforms, China has created what it calls, ironically, its new open door policy. It is actively seeking foreign investment in technology. One of the people who heads up China's search for outside capital is Rong Yuren. He is the head of the state-run CITIC, the China International Trust and Investment Corporation. Rong was a successful businessman before the revolution. He held public office in the 1950s, and he has had to readjust his own thinking about foreigners.
It took me some time to adjust to the change, from one who used to compete with or fight against foreign enterprisers to one who now cooperates with them. We used to view foreign investors as people who came to overpower us. This is not the situation now. Now we invite them to cooperate with us. So this is something totally different.
Mr. Rong, what's the goal of your organization, CITIC?
Principally, we're a product of our country's policy of opening up to the outside world. Our aim is to promote economic cooperation and exchange with foreign countries, with emphasis on introducing into our country foreign investment, technology, equipment, as well as advanced management systems.
Well, Mr. Rong, I know your job is to attract foreign investment, But foreign investors can't help but see that China has gone through many changes over the years. And the first question of any foreign investor has to be, how do I know my money is safe? How do I know you won't change the rules?
Our policy has been widely accepted. Once a policy is accepted by the broad masses of the people, it cannot be easily changed. We plan to start our cooperative businesses in the coastal cities and then spread to inland cities. This shows that our open policy is developing in a gradual and steady way.
As part of this plan, China created 4 special economic zones in 1979. These offer foreign businesses low tax rates, broad customs exemptions, less of the notorious Chinese red tape, some access to the domestic market, and, of course, cheap labor, about $80 a month for an average worker. The economic zones, especially one near Hong Kong called Shenzhen, have been a big success. They give China access to foreign know-how and cash, and an opportunity to experiment with reforms before trying them out on the country as a whole. In fact, these zones have worked so well that in 1984, 14 coastal cities were also open to foreign investment with special inducements. So once again, the foreigners are pouring into China. There are some familiar American companies doing business here, and the Japanese have an even larger presence. China is already one of their largest markets after the United States. Some of the foreign companies are coming in with a partner, the Chinese government. For example, American Motors, Kodak, and PepsiCo are here, along with hundreds of other companies which have entered into joint ventures. One foreigner who walked through the open door was President Reagan. In April of 1984, he visited the Shanghai Foxborough Corporation, one of the first co-ventures to go online. The visit and the soldering were symbolic, but the accomplishment here is very real. Today, after 3 years of negotiations and 2 years of operation, the joint venture is turning a profit. We visited Shanghai Foxborough ourselves a few weeks ago. Foxborough is a high-tech company from Massachusetts. General Manager Don Sorterup is the Yankee who was brought to Shanghai to run the operation. What do the Chinese hope to get out of this?
Well, they're looking for the transfer of technology of a product line that's going to be needed in this country for many, many years to come. And this keeps them on the leading edge of technology. And secondly, it was their desire to be able to learn how to run a business as close as possible to the way we might do it in the United States. And only by practice can that be absorbed. It's not something to be just taught through a textbook.
Do you see any dangers in transferring technology to a country like China?
No, I don't, because transferred technology in our business is very dynamic, and what may in fact be a very profitable and a very popular instrument today, in 5 years, may not be the same.
Because the change is so rapid.
Exactly.
How do the Chinese react to your way of doing things?
Well, I liken that to the fact that if I were in Foxborough, Massachusetts, or in Plymouth, Massachusetts, running a factory, and our chairman of the board came to me and said that now you're going to do things the way these 2 Chinese fellows are going to show you, it would be a very difficult change for me, and that's exactly what it is for them.
The 19th century China traders used to say that if each Chinese wore a robe just 1 inch longer, the textile mills of New England could hum forever. And now Americans are thinking again about such an enormous market. But it isn't easy to reach. China is poor even with its economic successes. Its foreign currencies like dollars will be spent on factories that produce the goods. Doing business in China takes enormous patience, and the laws of contracts, patents, and taxes that govern business are still being developed. But for those with energy and persistence, business can be done. And some of the most energetic of the new China traders are these 4 women. They are part of Kamsky & Associates. Here at their Beijing offices, they set up deals between the Chinese and a variety of foreign companies. The firm was started 5 years ago, and it has been very successful. The woman who put all this together is 30-year-old Virginia Kamsky. She comes from New York, but she's an expert on negotiating with the Chinese. Now she has built an organization of a dozen women, all of whom speak fluent Chinese.
We need to get landing rights for a private jet for AIG, American International Group.
Sarah, do we have Mr. Greenberg's passport information?
Is anyone really making money here?
Sure.
In what fields?
In every field, if you structure it right.
What does that mean, structure it right?
You have to structure it in a way that for the Chinese, they're going to make money too. I think if you come in here and you look at one-sided, the Chinese know when something's unfair, and you'll be in a situation where things will not move quickly. If you put something together where they're going to do well and you're going to do well, it's going to move. We started in 1980. The Chinese had no money, and we were able to structure transactions that were self-financing. Chinese wanted technology and equipment. We arranged to be paid in raw materials, and that worked at the time.
What you've been doing is structuring barter deals?
A large percentage is barter.
What's an example of something you might barter?
You can trade one commodity for another. You can bring one commodity into China, add value, then export the commodity. The Chinese have a special term for that. They call it lai lia jia gong, which literally means bring raw materials and add labor.
What kind of American ventures can be successful here?
I think ventures where, again, you're taking care of the basic, you're tapping their strongest raw material, which is labor. Or right now the Chinese are very interested in upgrading plants that they have. They have plants that are antiquated, and they want to bring them up to date. They don't necessarily want to bring them right up to 1985, but just bring them up 10, 15, 20 years.
From where?
From basically the 1950s. You're talking about technical modernization that stopped in the 1950s. And if you can take factories, ship in equipment, send in engineers, help to upgrade those factories, I think you've got a sure thing.
What kind of industries? What are examples?
You might have equipment that's in another country and doesn't make sense in the U.S. because it requires a lot of people. If you bring it to China, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of plants are closed. We find they're closed worldwide. They may be closed in the United States because they can't work efficiently. And you can knock those down, ship them to China, and you're basically bringing China from the 1950s up to the 1970s.
Let me see if I understand you right. We have a lot of mills in the United States that have shut down because they aren't competitive. And you say, put them in a box, ship them to China, and let the Chinese make what we used to make and compete with us.
That's right. That is going on. That's a phenomenon that's going on with or without China. And I don't think that you should ignore China if you say that if you transfer your equipment to China that you're going to put Americans out of jobs. It's happening right now in Korea and Taiwan. Many U.S. companies have manufacturing plants there. China basically provides them with another market for them. And if they don't look at China, other countries are. Western Europe is, Japan certainly is. So why ignore China? Why keep China in the dark ages?
Virginia Kamsky stresses that cheap labor is China's greatest resource. That is certainly apparent when you travel through the country past work crews like this one, widening the road by hand. China is seeking technology to modernize, but meanwhile, no other country can match the cost of labor here. And here's a familiar product, an Arrow shirt, the kind you could find at your own department store or discount store. This factory sends from 200,000 to 300,000 shirts a year to the United States. The people in this factory make an average of 20 cents an hour. We're used to jobs leaving and going to the Far East, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, but when China becomes a full-scale producer, we could say, you ain't seen nothing yet. The discrepancy between American wages and those in the Far East is already so great that American textile and apparel makers are protected by quotas. So it's important to remember when we see Chinese consumers buying Western goods that while China may become a market for us, it could also be a major competitor. It emphasizes the need for America to use its skills on the high end of technology. In the meantime, the Chinese have already increased their trade with us, and they are taking in more than foreign goods. They are taking in some unsettling foreign values. China's first model was the Soviet Union, so it was a gray, puritanical place, the kind of place where a husband might give a wife a wrench or a hammer, but not a ring. Now China is importing Western consumer goods and Western techniques and hoping to acquire them without the values that seem to go along with them. But can you bring in computers and stereos without bringing in video games and rock and roll? During Mao's time, dancing like this was strictly forbidden, and music always came with a message. We're told that before the reforms, songs came quite literally with titles like "The Production Brigade in the Hills Celebrates the Arrival of the Manure Collectors." Listen to this waltz. That's right, it's Home on the Range. This disco was sponsored by the Young Communist League as a way for young men and women to meet. The state's influence is pervasive. Who would have expected the Ministry of Light Industry to go into the cosmetics business?
For customers in the middle to upper stratum, light color lipsticks should be used, so they will look quiet but elegant. A bride needs bright color to be the prettiest lady at the wedding. If the bridesmaid uses color that is brighter than the bride's, there could be an awkward situation. Despite the fact that love is blind, to attract a sweetheart, a woman really needs makeup.
This is the state-run Ruby Beauty Salon in Shanghai, where women are willing to spend up to a month's salary to get permanence. The store features Ruby Cosmetics, a popular line of makeup manufactured by the state. The salon's energetic young manager is Chung Chu Lai.
Now that people have had more than enough to eat and wear, they want to improve their looks. So the future of the Chinese makeup business is a serious question, because it has to do with our living standard and our country's future. Our prospects are great, because China has 1 billion people. If 70% of them want to improve their looks, then we will have the largest beauty parlor business in the world.
He says the problem is that not everyone knows how to use makeup. Chinese women dressed very soberly during Mao's era. Wearing makeup brought severe discipline, sometimes even jail. The idea was not to be distinctive, but now Ruby Cosmetics shows women how to use its products and also gauges what customers want.
Managers should be young in this business, because a young person can adapt to change and come up with new ideas. Business success means innovation.
Chung Chu Lai's entrepreneurial spirit is unchecked. He says he plans to use lasers on acne and wrinkles and in plastic surgery to make eyelids look more Western, and he is soon to have a traditional Chinese massage department. In today's China, these fashions are as much a political statement as Mao's blue jacket. By encouraging women to think about their wardrobes, the government can encourage the textile trades. And one of the best ways to sell fashion is a television commercial. Commercials like this are running now on Chinese television. Viewers are bombarded by messages selling boots and blue jeans and fast food duck.
喂，九龙百家，美味佳肴，名扬天下，请君品尝。九龙百家，色香味美，鲜嫩爽口，瞧，多香！
And in a country as crowded as China, what could be more practical than a convertible sofa?
三猫头式3人沙发真好。
But not all commercials on Chinese television are Chinese. This Boeing commercial is part of a deal that CBS made with a state television network. They receive 64 hours of CBS programs for free in return for showing American ads. The programs were mostly sports and movies, like this Western, Calamity Jane.
被一个班长看出来我是个女的，报告了上校。啊，你瞧，好像是一只鹰抓住了一条蛇，真喜乐。
这。
They stare transfixed at the television. It may just be the novelty, but one has to wonder where this will all lead and what the true cost is of these imports.
留在城堡里，让我给大伙儿洗衣服。你听听，让我洗衣服。哈哈。
The messages being conveyed on China's stages are no less surprising than those on TV. These are scenes from the Beijing production of Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. The role of salesman Willie Loman was played by one of China's leading actors, Ying Ro-cheng. A life in the theater has given him a unique vantage point for observing the recent changes in Chinese society. Tell me, how have you seen life in China change through the theater?
Well, you know, our theater, during the Cultural Revolution, the entire theater was sent to the countryside after being criticized for about 2 years.
Did you go to the countryside?
Sure, sure.
What did you do?
Plant rice.
You planted rice?
Oh, yes, I'm very good at it.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, we were still being paid our original salaries, which made the rice we produced very expensive.
How long did you do that? How long did most people do it?
Oh, 3, 4 years, at least. Some went longer than that. And, well, I must say a lot has changed since then. From feeding pigs to playing Arthur Miller. It's a long way to go.
Mr. Ying, you were the star of the Chinese production of Death of a Salesman, a play that has condemned a lot of the values of a business society, and yet China is moving toward many of the values of a business society. You must have thought about that.
Yes, and I think in that sense, it's a very good reminder for us. We are going ahead with all the new reforms, but it is good to keep in mind that the whole thing may go awry. There are pitfalls which we should try to avoid. The reaction of some of the Chinese audience at first was very interesting. They were saying, what's this guy worried about? He's got a car. He's got a refrigerator. The house is going to be his in a month's time. And he's complaining. Why should he complain?
Yeah.
Well, by the time they've absorbed the play, little by little, they realize there are grounds for his dissatisfaction, let's say. And there are flaws in a dream that only values getting rich. So I think we should introduce more of that kind. In this business of getting rich, America is probably the forerunner in the world. So you've some experience there, and we should profit by your experiences.
The actor Ying Ro-cheng says, we'll have to learn from you. What a different kind of teaching. Twice in recent generations, we sent armies to fight land wars in Asia to teach the communists their limits. And now China is downgrading its army and taking lessons in getting rich. Yet the United States played almost no part in this new turn. Even our own expert China watchers were surprised by the speed of change. We know there are subterranean cross-currents, fits and starts, but the overriding questions are, will these reforms last? How far could they go? Deng Xiaoping, the author of this pragmatism, is 81 years old even for China. Each year that goes by solidifies his position, and 800 million peasants like their new freedom and profits. But there are still those who once considered Deng a heretic and would like to see him fail. He will need great skill to reap the benefits of a market economy without the problems of inflation and unemployment that even advanced economies must deal with. When policies do not work, China doesn't exactly vote the opposition in. What is exciting here is not commercials for Szechuan cola on TV. It is the energy produced by loosening the system. Ideas, once in the air, are hard to recapture and bottle up. 1 out of every 5 people on this planet is Chinese. Lifting 1 billion people even to modest prosperity creates a huge force. Much of the third world looks to China, so surely does the new generation in the Kremlin. We are so used to thinking of revolution in terms of ayatollahs and gunfire and explosions. Is it possible that history will look back on this development and find that one of the most significant events of the late 20th century was a rolling revolution that took place without a shot? I'm Adam Smith. Thank you for joining us.
Adam Smith's Money World is made possible by Metropolitan Life and affiliated companies. Because today, understanding the world of money is everyone's business.
Additional funding for Adam Smith in the New China has been provided by public television stations. We welcome your comments, and we'll be happy to send you a transcript of this program. Please send $2 to Adam Smith's Money World, WNET, Box 862, New York, New York, 10101. Please specify the subject of the program.